MHP SE, the world's second largest grains shipper and Ukraine's largest producer and exporter of poultry, suffered massive disruptions when Russia invaded the country in February of this year. This has not only meant food shortages in Ukraine, but also in many other parts of the world that rely on MHP and other Ukrainian exporters. CNBC international reporter Rosanna Lockwood spoke with MHP's executive chairman, John Rich, about how his company has continued operations under these extraordinary circumstances. Here's their conversation.
Basically, the company is the largest integrated agribusiness of its type in Europe and one of the top in the world. We produce up to 3 million tonnes of grain a year, 500,000 tonnes of sunflower oil, and close to 850,000 tonnes of poultry. So the company is fully integrated from its agricultural operations, which farm up to 1 million acres per year, through to having quite significant market shares within Ukraine, around about 50%, and we're around about the 5th largest global poultry exporter. So that's, in a nutshell, the company. After the war, it's pretty much the same, believe it or not, except there's a significant decrease in the amount of poultry that we sell domestically due to enormous disruption within the country. We're looking at 6 million people have left the country, women and children predominantly. We're looking at a third of our population displaced, and most men between 18 through to 60 cannot leave the country, and up to 3 million of those men are engaged within the Defence Forces and the Army.
Absolutely terrible and also extraordinary circumstances to be operating a company of your type under. And of course, there's been a lot of news focus about agricultural exports out of Ukraine. Just how have you worked around some of these issues? Do you focus more on the ports, the rails, or the road?
Basically, in our business today, it's all about logistics. The 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, is all about logistics. So where are we? I think at present, in relation to all exports, they must be via rail and they must be via road across the European borders. Small amounts of product go through riverboat systems from the ports of Ismail and Reading. But that's on the river systems next to Romania, as you're aware, in Moldova. I think that that is so congested today that it's just about a non-event, taking almost a month to get ships in and out of that particular location. So it's all about rail and it's all about the road systems going into Europe. And I might add that the Europeans have done a massive job in improving the logistics at the border, through clearance systems, customs, phytosanitary concerns have been all met. Enormous effort by the Europeans, of which obviously we're very, very thankful. But at the end of the day, the numbers are fairly simple. We used to export around about 80 million tonnes of grain a year. At present, at best, I can't see us exporting any more than 20 to 25 million tonnes annually. And so at the end of the summer growing season, we're left with probably most storages full, and then a long, slow drip feed over the next year to try and get some of that product out. But really, it's without the big deep sea ports open, such as Odessa and Mykolaiv, then I see no way of getting such large tonnages through to the countries that need it, particularly those that are in a major food security crisis.
And we will come on to the resilience points and how you've coped with all this, but I just want to ask a little bit more about some of the challenges as well with regards to your storage facilities as well. How vulnerable are they to attack, and your manufacturing points?
Well, look, I mean, it's like all these things. We've kept it relatively, like all Ukrainian companies, we keep a low profile. I mean, we're mainly situated in the west, as you're aware, and so consequently haven't been within the line of fire. But I might add that this doesn't mean that there's not uncertainty at any time of the day. There is. But at present, we have not incurred any damage on our facilities to date, not like what you've seen in the eastern part of Ukraine. But again, that doesn't mean that this is not going to happen tomorrow. It is what it is in a war situation.
And now driving down into some of those resilience points, you've already mentioned that you're an integrated company, MHP. How did that happen? Whenabouts did that happen in your growth? And what has it meant for your future survival and growth going forward?
Look, frankly, if we weren't as integrated as we were, which was really from farm gate through to value-added food services, which meant not only in Ukraine but across the whole space globally, we wouldn't have survived. The integration was critical. We controlled our own logistics, and this was critical in the early stages of the war, because when coal stores were bombed by Russian forces, then we were the last company standing to distribute a lot of food, particularly in the challenging areas in the east. So we obviously have thousands of trucks on the road, and this allowed us to distribute food not only for our own products but also other products for supermarkets, and also distribute humanitarian aid to those areas with a major displacement of the population moving from the east to the west. So frankly, if it wasn't for our integration, we'd be in a very serious situation today.
Just how closely have you been working with authorities, either at the national level in Ukraine or the local level, but also international governments?
Well, look, basically all three intimately. I mean, in a war situation within the country, everybody is helping everybody to solve challenges. So I think that we as a company, as a large company within the country, have worked intimately with the government, and they have done the same with us when they needed things that we could possibly achieve that normally wouldn't be able to achieve. I think that also we have actively engaged in with the EU and the United Kingdom in particular, and also in the MENA regions, the Middle East, North African regions. And this has facilitated a much easier flow of exported products to these destinations, because generally the documentation, which is normally raised in Ukraine through the competent authorities, all of a sudden had to be raised in different locations by different people, in some cases the EU, and there has been huge cooperation with the authorities within EU, UK and the MENA regions to be able to affect the export of soft commodities and poultry.
Talk to us a little bit about what that's been like as a management, trying to keep morale up, trying to keep people employed at the same time. But how has it been for the people in your business in Ukraine?
Well, look, at the beginning of the war, it was pretty tough, frankly. Enormous disruption. A lot of people had families in the east. They had to be moved across through to the western areas. These families came and lived with them. The company, of course, supplies all its food to the employees gratis. We ended up with extended families and feeding them in a time of war. An enormous amount of support for these employees and their families due to this situation has always been affected through to them. But look, it's the principle, of course, is that at the beginning of the war, really, everybody within the country was in denial, let's be honest. Even, apart from the intelligence services, I'd say in Western countries, most people were in denial. The financial world was in denial that this could happen, but it did. And then for a country at war, the secret to success is going from denial to acceptance in a very rapid way. And that, of course, did happen. And I might add, I suppose, that if you're looking at missiles flying into the next door houses, it doesn't take you long to really accept the principle of acceptance. But once you've got that entrenched, then the huge challenge with your workforce is to be able to keep them motivated, and I think that this is probably what happened in World War II, well before my day and my father's day. But I think that in this particular case, the people are fighting for their survival of their country and for the survival of their armed forces. And this is enormously motivating. We found that when a lot of men left our company to fight the war, women took over their positions very competently. There was just this huge spirit of camaraderie within the company all to this day. The motivation on the ground particularly driven by the chief executive officer and founder of the company, is to this day still amazing, driving the people, senior management, then driving lower management. And to this end, I think this has been the fact that we were always a company with very strong relations with our employees and stakeholders. This has come through to the fore and helped the company survive to this day.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was thinking, heading into this conversation, about how Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been giving a masterclass in management communications throughout this conflict, as well as, of course, fighting a war and making sure that his country continues to operate. What has that kind of message given Ukrainian companies? Do you think about that type of thing when you're communicating with your own employees?
Yeah, no question. I think that what has happened is that prior to the war, of course, our president probably wasn't, if you look at the polls, was on the lower end of the polls. What he has achieved, frankly, is amazing. He has polarised his complete population behind him. Everybody is 100% supportive of him. And I think that this cohesion between the people, the presidency and all senior businessmen within the country has really led to an extremely successful story in public relations, but also motivation of all people.
Motivation, absolutely key. I also want to just talk to you a little bit about just the management of a company at a time of huge crisis like this and conflict. The cash flow, for example, you very much firmly sit in the finance and communications end of things. What at the finance level have been some of the key challenges regarding cash flow?
Look, really, at the beginning of the war, I also came from an experience of the Asian economic crisis. It's all about cash. You ring fence the balance sheet and you preserve cash. And of course, you could see from what we did, that's we went to a bond solicitation process. We basically deferred our bonds, which was March, April, May, through to the end of this year, to preserve cash. Because at the same stage, what happened is that we lost all our banking lines because all banks closed up shop due to condition precedent of war. So then all your working capital lines literally flew out the window and you're on your own. So you had to conserve cash to be able to operate. And in the cash flow side of things, it's challenging because what's happened is the complete operating systems have changed. So if you've got inflation, particularly in our case, driven by high logistics costs. So you need more money anyway just to cover that. But at the other end of things, when you used to sell crops 80% forward, and at that time you are in a situation where you get most of that money up front and then the balance on loading, say, Odessa, well, all those contracts fell into forced majeure. And so now the payment cycle is totally different. Now your buyers have to get permission to load in a port such as Constanza, and then you get the product there and then you load it. And all this is taking, could take 2 months. And then you get paid on either an FOB basis or CIF. And so the whole cash flow cycle has changed dramatically. And so the requirement of cash went through the roof. It was a huge challenge. But at the end of the day, we came off the back of an extremely successful 2021. As you would read in, from our accounts, we came off at about 650 million EBITDA profit in the 31st of December 2021. And so we were in a very, very strong position going forward into 2022. Had it not been for that, we're probably in a different story. But that was our luck that we had been able to conserve so much cash from the previous year.
And you're still a listed company. What does that mean at a time of conflict, crisis and war, the pressure of having to deliver quarterly reports, think about investors and that type of responsibility?
Look, frankly, it's on that side of the equation, it's been business as usual. It was ingrained into our DNA. If you remember, MHP was an IFC World Bank invested company, equity in the beginning in 2002-3. and then multiple investments by IFC and EBRD over the next 15 years. So this is part of the DNA. It was always the corporate governance side was always a number one priority. And so consequently, this continued as usual. We have very large staff and extremely competent people driving it. And in this case, it has not been onerous.
And just as we wrap up, I want to ask you, from your vast experience as a business leader, this surely must have been one of the more challenging experiences of your career, even more so than the Asian economic crisis, perhaps. So from the learnings you've had from the last couple of months, I want to ask you what advice you would give our audience broadly about adaptability and resilience in a crisis.
Look, I think that adaptability and resilience is built into the DNA of a company. Fast-growing young companies, particularly if you're from, in this case, was from Eastern Europe, had that flexibility and resilience built into it. And we have a very young, very smart executive management, Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3, and this, of course, allowed for this resilience. But I think that, so this is just something that you get in young, fast-growing companies, okay, not necessarily mature companies that have been kicking around for a very long period of time, that are much more stilted in the way they make their management decisions. Management decisions in our company are made very fast by a few number of people with in conjunction closely with its board on a continuous basis. But I think that what the key message I think that I can give to people globally about where I think things are going in the future, no question, I agree with many other financial people, funds in particular. Globalisation as we know it, no question, is dead. However, my thesis is that what we will see is a move to what I have coined global local. This means that in companies, food companies in particular, you will be building, either through acquisitions or greenfield, companies within local destinations where food security is a key concern, and then your export divisions from breadbasket countries will actually be exporting value-added type products to service that country. But the whole model will change. As surely as the sun will come up tomorrow, this is going to happen, if not already. It was a consequence of COVID. Now this war has just accelerated it.
A very clear message, very well said. John Rich, Executive Chair, Mironivsky Hilber Product, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, Rosanna.